work on creating change and development for our nation, it is so necessary to involve the minds of our youth as they can bring new perspectives to pushing our nation forward. To look at this topic, joining us is Deputy Operations Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy Network, Bernice Antoine. The network is an NGO that seeks to highlight the voices of young people impacting on communities and the wider nation. This organization has done work covering areas such as human rights, mental health, and the environment, where they worked in partnership with other local youth organizations to bring awareness to GBV, or gender-based violence, in the country. Bernice, good morning, and thank you for joining us on AM Prime.
Hi, good morning, and thank you for inviting the entire Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy Network. Thank you for sharing your platform with us. And yes, I do want to echo your sentiments. The youth voice is so important in the development of Trinidad and Tobago.
So I understand that it's the Youth Advocacy Network. So is it, just to be clear, a network of other youth organizations, or is it a body singular by itself where you have individuals as members?
So yes, it is a body, a national youth organization, individual youth body. However, we do collaborate in several instances with other local youth organizations, but we are an independent body.
The thing that I would want to jump at first is how have COVID-19 impacted on your operations? Because I would imagine that you would be doing a lot of activities that would have required face-to-face interaction in the community and so forth. How has COVID-19 impacted on that?
COVID-19 has definitely impacted to a great extent in the way and the manner that we do things, but we still seek to carry out our mandate. So, for example, early in the year when we held our gender-based violence demonstrations with the recent women's protection movement, we would have done that in real life. But now we are seeing a shift to social media where we are actively engaging in social media. So we are doing several social media campaigns. And I would say every single day we're having a different post, a different campaign on social media. So it is strategically using social media to the benefit in order to effectively carry out our mandate. But another thing that we have to look at is how is COVID-19 impacting our youth population. Young persons now have to gravitate to a virtual environment, and how are they making that shift? So that's something else we're looking at, particularly the Mental Health Committee, mental health and the pandemic, mental health and COVID-19. So we would have been doing some engagement strategies like a games night to keep our members engaged as well. But in terms of our advocacy, we're definitely social media, and not just social media posts, but we also do webinars, we do videos, we collaborate with other experts in the field to inform our advocacy efforts.
And is there a relationship between the Youth Advocacy Network and the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service?
So we are a registered national youth organization, and in the national youth policy that was recently released, we are actually working actively towards a pillar number 3. Pillar number 3 states facilitating inclusive and active youth participation in the civic and democratic life of Trinidad and Tobago. So I would say that there is definitely a link with regards to the goals of the ministry as well as our organization, as well as we also serve other objectives of the national youth policy, for example, climate change, and of course, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So I would definitely say there is a very strong relationship between the mandates of the ministry and our youth organization.
Yeah. Now, I know that there is no two experiences in Trinidad and Tobago, especially among the youth population, that is exactly the same. Everyone has their different experiences across the country. But let's just say for the average youth, whatever that term may be, what is the experience like living in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of being engaged by our various public officials, whether it is being engaged in our education system, the services available to young people that may be specific to young people. Could you paint a picture of what that experience may be like for an average young person?
Definitely. And so you would have mentioned that no two experiences in Trinidad and Tobago for young persons are the same, and we are definitely seeing that reflected. But what we're seeing is that more ministers, more government agencies are trying to make effective use of social media, for example, Twitter Spaces, in order to ensure that they reach and include young persons in conversation. So I would say we are definitely seeing a drastic increase in social media. But in terms of the average young persons, you also have to think about unattached young persons that may not have social media, may not have devices. What about the individuals living without devices? So those are the experiences that young persons are having right now. Of course, there's a very high degree of uncertainty. No one ever experienced a pandemic before. So it's how do we use our youth perspective to propel us forward in this environment? But what I am seeing and definitely would like to commend is the fact that more government agencies are making efforts to collaborate with young persons, and more young persons are making efforts to collaborate with one another. But we are still seeing a drastic level of, I want to see uncertainty, because we don't know what the future is holding, in terms, especially with regards to, like, for example, CXC, and the recent pushback, SCA exams. These are things that young persons are thinking about every day, all day, after studying so many years. So that's a degree of, that's a basic picture of how it is feeling to be a young person right now. Yeah. We are I would say, on behalf of the entire youth population, we are definitely missing outside, but we have to recognize that we must do our part in order to stop the spread of COVID-19.
Now, I want to go back to something that you have mentioned in terms of government officials utilizing social media channels to connect with young people. So you would have mentioned Twitter Space. I want to be a bit of a devil's advocate here, because tokenism is something that many times we in the youth space speak about, and it's not something that we would encourage at all. Tokenism, therefore, is really using young people as pawns. You put them in the room and you say, well, we're engaging young people, or you're coming to meet them because you know that these are votes that you want to depend on and so forth. So I'm not necessarily calling any names because it's across the board. But do you believe that a lot of these interactions are genuine in terms of public officials now coming into these spaces and engaging?
Wow, that is a loaded question. Do I believe if these interactions are genuine? And I would say it's definitely too early to say, because as we're seeing, the pandemic would have now allowed us to interact with our government ministers on these social media platforms. But I know, and we definitely in history and in past events, we were seeing a level of tokenism where we would have only been engaged for certain events, but there was no formal accountability mechanism to ensure that that follow-up action and that we are on the agenda, not just for a specific period of time, but going forward. So I would definitely say it is too early to say. But what I would want to look at is reinforcing that we implement advocacy accountability mechanisms to hold our officials and government agencies accountable to what they say. And I think that with social media, that's something that can be done as well. You know, Twitter storms, tagging them, etc., etc. But I would say to hold fast, and I would want to monitor the engagement for a longer period of time. But I do recognize that is a problem that we face in the youth community.
Yeah, I'm listening to your response here, and I'm just really taken aback by how proud I am to hear you put that into perspective there, and to lay it out in that way, because the fact is that we do have to wait to see what comes out of these kinds of interactions, because too often we feel when it comes to monitoring and evaluating any kind of interaction and programs as well, because quite often we may see programs popping up, but what is the long-term benefit of these programs? So I really appreciate your response there. Now, moving forward, as we continue to deal with COVID-19, as young people continue to call for changes to different things, the right to be engaged, all of these different things, where is the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy Network in terms of access to resources to support young people's aspirations, having a platform to really drive home the point that young people want to be heard and so forth. Where are you all in the mix? Do you get sufficient support, or what more can be done to assist the network?
Okay, so I do believe that we are getting a level of support, but let me talk about the platform first, and then I can speak about the support that we need to get further support. So I would say in terms of the platform, the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy Network has been very active, I would say, in the recent collaborations. For example, early in the year with the, I would have mentioned it earlier, with the Women's Protection Movement, we would have partnered with several organizations. Our Gender-Based Violence Committee partnered with several organizations, to facilitate the Write Your MP campaign, to do advocacy efforts in front of the Red House for the realization of certain advocacy goals. And you would have seen that coming out of the recent debate afterwards. And we also would have seen the amendments of certain acts. And so I would say that the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy would have been very active, as well as engaging with other organizations. Because one of the things we wanted to emphasize is the fact that we are a unity, and there's no one advocate or no one organization that can accomplish this goal alone. Gotcha. We must work together in order to accomplish this goal. Yeah. As well as utilizing our platform. One of the things we would have realized actually is a media committee, so that we could effectively and strategically optimize the use of our social media platforms. So ensure that we have a voice, that we have a platform, so that when young persons say this is an issue that we're having, we have sufficient influence and sufficient weight to add to the conversation, to advocate on behalf of others, and to allow others to advocate on behalf of themselves as well. Yeah. Moving more towards the support end, I think it's extremely important that youth organizations are supported, because we would have been conducting several gender-based violence campaigns, mental health campaigns, and I do see a degree of willingness of experts to come onto youth platforms and to share their experience and to share their resources. However, of course, I do agree that there could never be enough. Yeah. There could never be enough support. Of course, it is well appreciated, and it's extremely grateful. Yes. But there needs to be more in terms of, more access to the hotlines, more access to certain resources, so that when we do the gender-based violence campaigns and we have individuals coming forward wanting to access the resources that we have here. But I would definitely say that, we have been receiving that support, we have been receiving those resources. Excellent. And we are extremely grateful for that. But of course, the need in Trinidad and Tobago of young persons in Trinidad and Tobago, it's growing, especially now in this uncertain time, and so that we need to match that need with the resources. So thank you again for all our donors, our sponsors, etc., etc. We are extremely grateful. Unfortunately,
Bernice, we have run out of time. We're actually over time. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to the show this morning and giving an in-depth understanding of the realities facing young people and the work of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy Network.
Okay.
All right, so that was Deputy Operations Officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Youth Advocacy Network, Bernice Antoine, sharing with us some information there. Folks, this brings to an end our show for this morning.